Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. Rabbi Chaim Richman here, together with everybody's best friend, Yitzchak Reuven, from the Temple Institute in Jerusalem, Israel. Today, the 7th day of Adar Rishon, the first month of Adar, in a leap year of 2 Adars, 5779. It's the 12th of February, 2019. And this Shabbat we are reading Parshat Tetzaveh, and you shall command. We are still behind the scenes on Mount Sinai, listening to the conversation taking place between the Almighty and Moshe about our favorite subject, our life's work, the temple. The tabernacle to become the temple. Place of divine service, the focal point of man's aspirations, a spiritual meeting place, the rendezvous between God and man. And Parshat Tetzaveh is all about one subject only. By the way, it begins in the book of Exodus in chapter 27, but actually in verse 20 of chapter 27. And it is all about one subject, and that is the Kohanim, the lineal descendants of Aaron, the priestly clan, the Kohanim that are instructed by God, chosen by God especially, to be the conduits of blessing in this world, to attend to the divine service. It's all about them. It's about their vestments. It's about their garments. It's about the succession of the priesthood. It's also about the tamid offering. It's about the incense altar. It's about the ceremony of the inauguration of the priests in the Holy Temple. So we are still in the midst of this explosion of temple consciousness that Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, are receiving now.
Well, they're not yet receiving.
Well, we're receiving it because we're reading it behind the scenes. But yes, Moshe will come down from Mount Sinai in Parshat Kitisa, rather not abruptly, but in a rather difficult moment of of catching the people red-handed with the golden calf debacle, and then he will actually give over the commandments of the building of the tabernacle to become the temple in Parshat Vayakel. Listen, I have some things to share today that I want to give over to my dear listeners. And by the way, today is the 7th of Adar, and the 7th of Adar in a regular year, when there's only 1 month of Adar, the 7th of Adar is universally recognized according to Jewish tradition as the anniversary of the passing of Moses. But because of the unique, dynamic, spiritual, I would say mystical relationship between the 2 months of Adar 1 and Adar 2 and how they interface, I would say that today is observed, it's not exactly Moshe's yahrzeit, but it is like a shadow, like an image of his day yet to come. But that means that there is an influence in the air today of Moshe, it's all pervading his presence in our lives. But today is absolutely the anniversary of the passing of a woman named Miriam Bat Chaim. Today is her yahrzeit, and I would like to honor her memory and dedicate some words of Torah on her yahrzeit on the day of her passing, Miriam Bat Chaim. I have some things to share from my heart that is not easy for me at all. I feel quite distraught, actually. I feel quite at a loss for words. I feel beside myself even, and I want to relate to you an idea of how I can express this feeling of inadequacy of being able to speak about something. You know, there's a very beautiful prayer, Kabbalistic prayer. It's called Ana B'Koach. Yitzchak, as a serious student of Jewish mysticism, is very familiar with this prayer. It is actually composed of 7 lines, each one containing 6 words. And it is attributed to the great Talmudic sage Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, 1st century sage. And it actually is a permutation, this poem, this acrostic, these 6 lines, it's a permutation of the inutterable, ineffable name of God, which consists of 42 letters. And it's quite a complex, I would say complex composition of construction of how the letters that that form an acrostic of the acronyms, the Rashi Tevot of each of these words form a different illumination of an aspect of Hashem's name. It's a very, very beautiful prayer. It's part of the standard Siddur of the morning service of, I think it's all across the board of the different communities of Jewish people. It's also, there are special times of year when it's recited as its own prayer, like during the days of the counting of the Omer. I want to translate it for you for a moment in English. One of the best translations that I've seen on the internet of this prayer. And the reason I say, one of the best translations is because it's hard to translate. It's a very, very cryptic, enigmatic, poetic, prosaic type of scholarly Hebrew. It's very, very hard to translate. But here's a very interesting translation. It goes like this. Please, it's a prayer to God, okay? Please, with the strength and greatness of your right arm, untangle. Period. Untangle. This particular translator added in parentheses, untangle our knotted fate. Accept the chanting of your nation, lift us high and purify us, awesome one. Please, heroic one, those who seek your unity, guard them as the pupil of an eye. Bless them, purify them, may your righteous mercy always redeem them. Impenetrable and holy one, with your abundant goodness, guide your people. Unique and proud to your people, turn to them who remembers your holiness. Accept our pleas and hear our cries, knower of secrets. The reason that I reference this almost impenetrable, enigmatic prayer, very, very amazing, powerful spiritual tool, by the way. You can look it up and do some research about this prayer and make it your own. The reason I reference it is because of the last line. The last line, Shavatenu kabel, Ushma tfilatenu, Shavatenu kabel, Ushma tzakatenu, Yodea talumot, which is translated here as accept our pleas and hear our cries, knower of secrets. We end up by calling Hashem knower of secrets. The reason I'm doing this whole thing now, my friends, I'm referencing this prayer because of the meaning of this last line. This last line is amazing. Basically, what it's talking about, what the great holy, holy, holy sage who penned these words from his heart, what he was saying was, this last line, accept our pleas and hear our cries, knower of secrets, is referring to the level of prayer that never leaves the heart and formulates the lips. It formulates on the lips. It's never articulated and uttered by the lips because it's too difficult to even say. It's like it's stuck in the heart. It's not. It's like whether it's the highest or the deepest or the most painful prayer or that which we're unable to even acknowledge or even able to deal with. It's referring to a certain level of prayer. And I identify it with pain, and you can't even speak it. It's like, I want to pray to you, Hashem. I have things that I want to say. I want to communicate with you. I want to let you know how I feel about something, but I can't even say it. And this prayer is accessing and facilitating that level of feeling. And basically the petitioner is saying to Hashem, accept our pleas.
Accept what I cannot articulate.
Exactly. Accept our pleas. And in fact the commentaries say, what does it mean, hear our cries? The ones that are buried in my heart that I can't even speak. And that's why this particular stanza ends with the appellation. We're calling Hashem knower of secrets, because you know my prayer even without my saying. Yes, like the Rambam says, it's a mitzvah, it's a positive commandment to pray, even though one can say, why do I need to pray? Why do I need to pray? Hashem knows what I need even better than me, and He knows what I need without my asking for it. In fact, maybe what I think I need, I don't even need. But the Rambam explains the reason why it's a mitzvah to pray is because we demonstrate that we believe that Hashem hears us and that He's our God and He's there for us, and He wants to know what we have to say. It's a personal thing, but this is even higher level. This is saying, like, you know that I know that I know that you know that I want to say this, but I can't even say it. Help me. Just like pull it out of me, just like extract it. Do an extraction. Knower of secrets, because you know what's deep in my heart that I can't even say. The reason I say all of this is because I'm so totally overwhelmed and distraught by the murder of this beautiful 19-year-old girl, Ori Ansbacher, who was brutally raped and murdered by an Arab from Hebron last week. And it's really struck the nation a very deep chord. A lot of people are up in arms.
And I just want to add that the rape and murder took place in Jerusalem.
Yes, the rape and murder took place in Jerusalem by a terrorist, 29 years old, who left Hebron with a knife, entered Israel illegally, and was looking for a Jew to murder. This by his own admission. He met her by chance in the forest outside Jerusalem. She went out there because she loved Hashem, and she went out there to pray privately, her hitbodedut. She was a girl who wrote poetry, and she left behind beautiful expressions of love for the world and for Hashem and hope for peace. And he saw her and did what he did. And he said, he admitted in his interrogation that he wanted to either be a shahid, which means he wanted to be a martyr in Islam. He wanted to be a martyr and go to heaven for killing a Jew, because there's nothing will get you into heaven like killing a Jew. Or he wanted to be in an Israeli prison. I guess he hasn't decided which one yet. And I guess that was part of the whole hullabaloo in the defense establishment. They were trying to determine, was it a terrorist act? Wasn't it a terrorist act? Was it actually al-reka lumani, which means was it with nationalist motives? Because if it was, that would be a whole different thing. Because if he did that would mean that he would get a salary for life from the Palestinians. Because Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, pays a very big salary to terrorists, a lifetime salary.
Especially if they've killed a Jew.
For killing. And of course, Netanyahu said that starting this coming Sunday, let's see if it really happens. He said that starting this coming Sunday, he's going to see to it that this law goes into effect, that we deduct from all the money that we give to the Palestinians every month that we keep them alive. We're going to deduct the money that he continues to give blatantly and arrogantly every month to the Palestinian murderers. By the way, this particular fellow was caught on the Temple Mount with a knife
2 years ago.
2 years ago, and he said he's going to be back, and he made it very clear that he wants to kill a Jew. You know what? We've all lost our minds. All lost our minds, that if we could even be in any degree going back to business as usual. You know, people die every day, my friends. Everybody knows it. It's part of life. People are killed every day. There was a horrible accident on the roads here in Israel a couple days ago where a bus overturned and two women, I think they were sisters, two wonderful young women were maybe they weren't sisters, I think they were killed on this bus. Horrible, horrible road accident. 40 people were injured. But it's not the same thing, and it's not something that can be compared to the brutal murder, rape and murder, and other things that we won't even talk about that could be done to a Jewish girl just because she's Jewish. And one of the things that makes me most distraught, it makes me distraught that it happened. It makes me distraught that this terrorist will not be given the death sentence, even though there's a whole movement, there are signs all over the place, get the death sentence, get the death sentence. It makes me very distraught that he won't be pulled apart and that his organs won't be slowly dismembered. But of course, you know, the IDF went to his house the night that he was caught, and they mapped it out. I don't know what kind of mapping they have to do, the demolition squad, but they mapped it out to prepare for the possibility that maybe his house is going to be destroyed, as if that's maybe a deterrent. The security establishment seems to think that the best deterrent to this type of savagery is that they should know that we're going to destroy their house. But anyway, one of the things that makes me most distraught, other than the very fact that it happened, and it's the most horrific, horrible thing that I feel like I can't go on. One of the things that makes me most distraught is that you listeners, and I have the feeling that many of our listeners are people that really love Israel and really love the Jewish people and really see behind the sham and the lies of all of the things that are said about the Israeli occupation and Israel and all the ridiculous things that are all the lies and filth that's made up about Israel. I know that a lot of our listeners, I hope most of them are very, very emphatically on the side of Israel, the people, and the God of Israel and the state of Israel. But you probably don't even know about this. You only know about this murder if you read Arutz Sheva or any other Israeli-based media outlets. And I wouldn't say such an outrageous thing, but I checked. I checked so thoroughly, and I'm extremely thorough when it comes to research, and I know that it was not reported in America. I think it was reported in a French outlet and maybe in a Spanish outlet, but it was not reported. The American media, CNN, that reports on a Japanese girl that was killed as a result of abuse from her father in Japan, and every kind of deplorable, despicable act anywhere will be headlines, but not this one. It was not reported. And I think that is so absolutely incredible. And I guess it wasn't convenient. I guess it wasn't convenient to report it. What about all the hashtag Me Too and hashtag Enough is Enough and hashtag feminists, all the feminists that are rallying around any kind of example of what's called femicide, right? Or any kind of abuse of women. And all the women being empowered that are out there with their marches and their crazy hats and all the things that they do. How come they didn't make a poster girl out of Ori Ansbacher like they did out of that Palestinian girl who slapped a soldier and was in prison? This is not a story because it's not convenient for the Democrats. It's not convenient for them to talk about a Jewish girl in Israel that was being killed, because it's only convenient to talk about the Palestinian suffering, Palestinian rights. They only talk about Israel when it comes to promoting their agenda. All this at a time when every day I'm reading in the newspaper about yellow swastikas and the word Juden written on Jewish-owned shops in France, and cemeteries that are being desecrated in England, and Jews being attacked in Brooklyn, and new revelations about the Holocaust, that most of the Jews were killed in the first 3 weeks and they couldn't have done it without IBM, who developed special software for keeping track of all the Jews, and the Finnish soldiers, who now it comes out that Finland aided in the killing of Jews. And all this stuff, it just rolls over me. But here we are in the state of Israel, in Jerusalem, our capital, and this wonderful girl who actually, her whole dream was about living in peace, like her mother said at her funeral, that her goal was, her mother said, like, everyone should try to bring light into the world. You know what? This is just so amazing. You got the socialists in America now, like, what's her name that I can't stand, that I have a block against her name? You know who I mean.
There could be more than one person, Rabbi.
No, it's the one who said she's also from Jewish ancestry.
Alexandria.
Right, that's the one. You got her. You got the Minnesotan Ilan Omar, who is tweeting all this anti-Semitic stuff, unbelievable stuff. You know, like raising these specters of these anti-Semitic tropes and unbelievable things. And you got all this going on, and here you have this Jewish girl that's basically torn apart by a savage Arab. And if I wouldn't tell you, and you wouldn't be reading Israeli outlets, would you even know? Does it even matter? And that's why I referenced the beautiful prayer of Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, accept our pleas and hear our cries, knower of secrets. It's like this, I had to take such a drink before this show. This is so hard for me to even talk about her and not just break down.
Yeah. I've got nothing to add to what you said, Rabbi.
So let me share one thought with you then. A thought with you that I shared yesterday with some friends on the Temple Mount. Yesterday I was able to ascend to the Temple Mount. I'm not able to do that as often as I'd like to. I haven't been feeling well. But yesterday I was able to go on the Temple Mount. A beautiful, sweet experience. And I shared a thought about Parshat Tetzaveh, a Torah thought based on this week's Torah portion. I shared a thought with some friends about Ori Ansbacher, of blessed memory. And I want to dedicate this thought to her. Because the thing is, this unbelievable thing is that this is all about the Kohanim, right? First of all, the Kohanim are chosen by Hashem. The priests are chosen by Hashem to represent not only the people of Israel, but to atone for the entire humanity. And God says that we're going to be a kingdom of priests, a priestly nation. So what the Kohen is to the Jewish people, the Jew is supposed to be for the whole world, a conduit to bring divine blessing into the world. But what's the unbelievable thing that all of a sudden, like Hashem opened my eyes when I was on the Temple Mount, I had this thought. The priestly garments atone for all human failing, and the robe of the Kohen Gadol atones for murder. In other words, the Kohen, when he's serving in the temple and he's wired, he's wearing these garments that are Hashem's requirement for him to be serving before him. He represents all of mankind. And he goes into the holy place, and it's written that just as the offerings bring about atonement, even the garments that are worn by the priests bring about atonement. And one of the things that's written is that the tunic, the ketonet of the Kohen Gadol, it brings about atonement for murder. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? We have seen this week in the murder, the butchery of this girl, we have seen the most horrific potential of humanity. We have seen what the depths of the lowest human could possibly be. And then you look at the Jewish people and what we're called upon to do, and it's like such a total polar opposite that the Kohanim in the Holy Temple are representing all of mankind, bringing about a state of spiritual tikkun, blessing for all mankind, that the Kohen is so totally aware of his responsibility to all humanity. When he goes into the holy place, he's very clothing, he's looking at his clothing, he's not allowed to even divert his thoughts from his clothing for a minute. He's thinking, I want to atone for my brethren and for all humanity. He's wearing this tunic which atones for murder. And it's like so opposite the reality of the culture of murder of those that are sovereign in the place of the Temple Mount, who, and this fellow, his first name is Arafat, so you know who he was named after, and he's 29 years old, so he was raised completely in the milieu of the culture of hating Jews. And you think that he killed and butchered and desecrated the body of this girl and destroyed her soul? Do you think he did that because of the occupation? No, he did that because he's being raised by the Palestinian Authority to hate and kill Jews and want to be a shahid and want to either murder and go to heaven, get his virgins, or go and get his salary for the rest of his life. And it has nothing to do with Israeli occupation. It has to do with a culture that worships death and murder and that is bloodthirsty. And you didn't even hear about it because she's just a Jew after all. She's just
a Jewish girl who life or death does not register in the international media that rules this world. Here's the music, Rabbi.
That's it. We'll be right back. If you can stand it, we'll be right back. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with Rabbi Chaim Richman here in Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the 7th day of Adar Rishon, the first Adar of this year, 5779. It's the 12th of February, 2019, and we are talking about this week's Parshat Tetzaveh. And just the choreography of the whole thing just amazes me. You know, like we said, God is there, top of Mount Sinai, Moshe and God, they're together in this spiritual, metaphysical place at the top of the mount. And last week
they're like dreaming of a better world.
Yeah.
And that's the thing again, if I ever just bring up, I'm not letting a moment pass by in this program without discussing Ori, of blessed memory. It's like Parshat Tetzaveh is like the opposite and the antidote of fake news. It's like, this is the way the world is supposed to be. Hashem says, let's set up a world that we can both live in.
Right.
And that's why I say, like, look what's going on around us. It's like the utter unraveling and the utter
meltdown.
Destruction, meltdown of humanity, humanity being created in God's image.
So God's first request, first command, however you want to see it, is build for me a mikdash, a sanctuary, a place for my presence within my people. And then in this week's parsha, God talks about putting a man in that place. Because why would God want to be in a place where there's not going to be humanity? It's not that God is asking us to create a separate area, entity or something where he can dwell in comfort, alone, without being bothered by. But man is the very center of this place.
That speaks so much about the whole concept of Torah Judaism, because it's so man-centered.
It's man-centered.
It's about man's relationship with God. It's not, it's easy. We always talk about like the difference between the word like holiness and in Torah, or what it means. It means being separate, and the idea of like pop or popular spirituality is like you can roll your eyes and you can pretend that you're holy, and you can pretend that your mind is in a lofty place, but if you can't function on the level of man and man, the commandments that are applicable between man and his fellow, of how to treat another person, of the way you want to be treated, the way you act with other people, then there's no God in it at all.
So the description of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, when understood by what you started to talk about earlier, Rabbi, that his clothing and all his actions are meant to
every move he makes. That's the idea of his clothing. Every move he makes is like
for humanity.
He's tied with a cord of responsibility to the entire human race, and it's like every step that he takes is measured, and in that place with such awe and reverence to try to uplift all of humanity. That's why it's so ironic. Like it struck me the tremendous gap. It's cataclysmic, this gulf between what we're reading about in Parshat Tetzaveh and the goal, the lofty goal, the aspiration of taking responsibility of humanity, of being the priests for the whole world, and this example of what the Arab mentality is really all about. I gotta tell you, people think that, again, it's so painful, like the inimitable. Gioli, what is his name? How do I pronounce his name? The Italian journalist who writes in Arutsheva. He wrote a beautiful op-ed, and he wrote about how, there's been no condemnation, not by the European Union, who is quick to condemn the construction of a new Israeli house in Judea and Samaria, not by the UN, right? Not a word. It always meets in an emergency session when Israel kills a terrorist in self-defense, but there's been not a word about it. The Western newspapers, right? They're always making a big deal about all the terrorists who gather on the border of Gaza to destroy Israel, and if one of them dies because they're attacking Israel, make a big deal about that. The Pope, Abu Mazen, pay for slay. Not a word from anybody about this. And one of the things that hurts me so badly is the fact that the reason that the West doesn't report on it is because there's this attitude, and you know that it's true, that we get what we deserve because we're Israelis, because we live here, because we're occupiers, because we have an apartheid state, and all this CRAP. And that's why they don't report on it, because they think, well, what do you expect? You're Israelis. And the whole thing, boycotting Israel, criticizing Israel, and people who have no idea about this incredible moral abyss between Israel and all of those who want to destroy it and kill it. And all these misunderstandings about the nature of the conflict, and all the myths that need to be busted and torn apart about what people think is really going on here. They think the conflict is about the land, but Jews have continually lived here for over 4,000 years, right? And in 1948, Jews declared statehood. What was it based on? It was based on the UN partition plan, but immediately after the UN partition plan, all the Arab countries attacked Israel, right? And everybody thinks that the reason that we have a conflict is because the Palestinians don't have a state. But in 1937, the Arabs rejected the Peel Commission report that called for 2 states for 2 peoples. And in 1947, they rejected the partition plan. And in 2000, at Camp David, they rejected statehood. And in 2008, they rejected another opportunity to create a Palestinian state. And the core of the conflict is the fact that they refused to recognize Israel's right to exist altogether. And that's the thing about Palestinian terror. It's not the result of Israeli oppression, it's the result of their education to hate. It's the result of
Israeli largesse, because if Israel wasn't so forgiving, wasn't so large, then Israel would have dealt with this
My
situation
goodness,
in a very
and
different way many
the
years ago.
restraint that we show is, in my opinion, ridiculous. But at least I'll admit that it's incredibly morally superior and it's incredibly morally high ground. But I think it's also ridiculous. I have no idea why we will not impose the death penalty on these horrific monsters. But again, they educate to hate. They educate to incentives. They pay money to murder Israelis. And all this crap that you hear about Israel being apartheid and racist, it's so ridiculous. You know, I'll say something that'll make me sound like a racist. I'll say that you go to the mall in Jerusalem and you can't even get a seat at a cafe because all the Arabs are sitting there comfortably. And I walk by. I'm sorry, I'm trying to say this again with controlling my emotion. I walk by an outdoor cafe, and there are a number of Arab women sitting at the tables of this cafe. And I walk by, and I hear them say, "Ori Ansbacher," and they're smiling snidely and glaring at me. Like, can you imagine it's like science fiction. Understand? And the world portrays us as being oppressors, that these people are wonderful, they want to live with us, and everything. Justices on the court in Israel are Arabs, doctors, lawyers. It's equal opportunity for Jews, for Christians, for Druze, for Arabs, and yet everybody talks about apartheid and racism, and it's all a ridiculous, filthy lie that is used by the enemies of Israel who simply don't want Israel to exist.
And is by and large funded and underwritten by the West, by the way. There's a lot of tentacles that feed into this machine of hatred and murder. And the European Union is up to its neck in directly supporting terrorist organizations and enemies of the state of Israel.
The Israeli government just issued a whole report you can read about. You can click on a link in the Times of Israel or in the Jerusalem Post called "Terrorists in Suits," and it's all about this report that proves these incredible links between all these BDS organizations that are these ultra-left liberal peace organizations and the direct funding of terrorist organizations, and it's all funded by the West. You know, for weeks now, I've been saying how this is not a news program, and I haven't felt like discussing the news. I've been keeping it in the Parsha, but I see no contradiction because, honestly, this is like exactly what Parshat Tetzaveh is all about. Parshat Tetzaveh is Hashem's vision of building a holy temple, and it being a place of prayer for all nations, and it of being a place of coming to an understanding of the human condition and of harmony and of blessing. And again, that's exactly what we're all about. That's what, I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. I mean, I don't apologize. That's who we are, and that's who we are supposed to be, and that's what we're reading about in the Torah portion. And that's what we're fighting for.
And getting back to the Torah portion, reflecting on what we've been saying, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who is given these garments, they're almost like a superhero's clothing, and he is a superhero. He represents super responsibility because he is taking on a responsibility for his brothers. You notice that in the Parsha, he's referred to many times as Aaron, your brother. Mm-hmm. It's always your brother. Who can best represent you or me but our brother? I mean, brotherly responsibility is.
And it's also the attribute that they represent, which is Hashem's attribute of chesed. Mm-hmm. You know, some years ago, I did a video about comparing the Kohen in his garments to the superhero garments, to the superhero costume, and talking about how he really is the superhero, but specifically because of his humanity, not because he has some extraterrestrial, superpowers. The real superpower is to be a superhuman being. Yeah. And who these people are is part of the mystery of what makes them special, of why they're special. And that's something that I hope we're going to touch upon this week, Bezrat Hashem, in our video teaching about Parshat Tetzaveh.
And his job, the Kohen's job, is to serve humanity by serving God, or to serve God by serving humanity, representing all of humanity. I mean, it's funny. It's the Mikdash, whether it's a tabernacle or the Holy Temple, is a physical place. And just like Moshe, our Midrash tells us that Moshe he said to God, how can we build just like Solomon said when dedicating the first temple, how can you fill
The
everything.
heavens and the heavens of heavens.
So how can we possibly build a space for you? But not only is there space for God in this mikdash, but there's a space for a human being who represents all of humanity.
And what the West has done, and especially the Democratic Party, it's pushed God out completely. I mean, in New York, it's like the whole deal that's going down with abortion and the incredible amounts of babies that are being killed. It's really, really amazing what's going on. It's like God has been pushed out completely. So is the ennoblement of the human spirit. So is the whole idea of a person's being created in God's image.
Yeah, wow, Rabbi, you're really bringing me down here.
I'm sorry. Look, the fact is, listeners who would like to learn more about the Kohanim and the priestly garments, of which the Temple Institute has invested tremendous resources of knowledge over the past 3 decades, can log on to templeinstitute.org. We have some very nice interactive study tools there that are very informative about this week's Torah portion of the priestly garments.
And again, the garments which, Torah goes into such detail with the garments, and it seems like every thread, every fiber, every stone that's part of the garment has its own function in terms of facilitating the Kohen's ability to make this connection, to be this conduit between humanity and God.
And again, this amazing teaching that the various priestly garments are an atonement, whatever that means. They're an alignment. They're a spiritual alignment for the failings of humanity. Some years ago, I coined a phrase that we've been using in our teachings throughout the years about the Kohanim, and I say the Kohen Gadol, in particular, the high priest, is every man. Mm-hmm. Not Superman, but every man. And that when he walks into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, he is representative of all humanity. Another thought that I shared on the Temple Mount in memory of Ori is this idea, but Hashem has this obsession about certain colors, and like you said, like every thread, right? So like we have in the priestly garments the crimson and the sky blue, tchelet and argaman, tolat shani, right? Purple, crimson, and red, and blue. Why? Why are these colors so important? Actually, there is a connection between these colors in the garments of the high priest and the original garment that Hashem made for Adam, Adam HaRishon. And of course, this is connected to Yosef's coat of many colors, but that's another story altogether. But the fact is, this is just another idea of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest in the Beit HaMikdash, being a representative of all humanity. He is Adam again, and especially overlaid on the mystical idea that the location of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem is the center of the Garden of Eden and the location of the Tree of Knowledge and the Tree of Life. Everything, all the priestly service, everything that's going on in the Holy Temple is a step in the process of the rectification of the original eating from the Tree of Knowledge. And so again, the idea of this aspiration, this prayer, this hope, this wish, this almost inutterable prayer, again, this deep from the heart, to take responsibility for humanity, to steer it in the right direction, to bring the whole world closer to God. That's what this is all about. And that's what and I think it's precisely that is the reason for this bloodthirsty monster wanting to tear that asunder, because it's like it's light versus darkness. That's what this is all about.
Yeah, the difference between man existing on a spiritual level in the Garden of Eden, in the presence of God, and man not existing on that level is responsibility. It was a lack of responsibility which drove man from the Garden of Eden, and it's the reassumption of responsibility for one another which has the potential to bring us back into the Garden of Eden via the Holy Temple and via the service of the priests in the Holy Temple. And it's just, you can't say it enough. It's a matter of responsibility, selfless responsibility, knowing that by being responsible for others, that you're also covered. You don't have to, this modern egotism and self-centeredness is just...
And political correctness.
And political correctness.
Here you have the high priest is wearing the choshen. The high priest is wearing the breastplate. And by the way, again, those listeners that are very interested in details, you and I were very active over the past decades personally in the identification of the 12 stones of the breastplate. And that was one of the most fascinating projects, the creation of the actual breastplate, which is ready for use here in Jerusalem at the Temple Institute. But, the whole idea of the breastplate of judgment, like judgment based on the Torah, comes from the inspiration of Hashem's presence. And it is straight and narrow. It is Hashem's judgment, right? And I think about that. And then you think about the judgment of today's justices that are totally colored by political considerations and by political agendas. I mean, again, I keep going back to this, but Israel has a death penalty on the books. It was only employed once, and that was in 1962, when Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust, was put to death. But you know what? Israel has a death penalty, and I think it's just incredible that it is not employed in situations like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a time and a place for it.
But we have to be so super, super fine and liberal, and what will people say if we would do such a thing? And how dare we? How dare we do such a thing?
So again, it's
just a Jewish girl who was murdered, after all. It's not even worth a line in the New York Times, not even on the bottom of a page somewhere.
So we, talking about responsibility, and we may even pride ourselves on we're basically responsible people. But we see from Tetzaveh that the real, assumption of responsibility, even if you're not the Kohen Gadol, it's a huge, huge life effort. It's a huge responsibility that is not bigger than any person, but it is something that has been so pushed, to the edges of our existence in the modern world. There's so many other enticements and so many other, things that we can get sucked into that are the complete antithesis of showing any type of responsibility or selflessness and thinking about others. And it's really a daily task to it's like the Kohen has to put on his garments every day. We also have to put on our garments of being responsible every day. It doesn't it doesn't happen magically. It's a lot of work, daily work. And it's easy to just get, towed along in the drift of modern society, and lose sight of our responsibility toward one another.
Let's talk for a moment about the Temple Mount Revolution.
Oh?
Yesterday I was on the Temple Mount, and I must say, it's like night and day. The difference between the experience that we have now and that which we have had over the years that we've been reporting about systematically, thoroughly over the decades. We still can't pray openly on the Temple Mount, but the revolution is happening. It really is, because it's just become such a fact of life now that Jews go to the Temple Mount that it is now the way they're treated by the police is completely different. It's with respect. It's basically with understanding, and the entire experience I find to be completely different, because we've made a mark, and the mark is that we're here to stay and that we demand to be on the Temple Mount. And I think that this is good news, and I think that we are really clearly progressively coming to the place, the time when there will be open prayer for Jews on the Temple Mount.
I believe it will be soon. And I will say that, again, in the theme of responsibility, Jews have taken up the responsibility of not forsaking the Temple Mount, of being seen there, which is the commandment, to be seen in that place. And thousands of Jews now have taken up that responsibility. And I will say that as far as the police, they also have resumed a much larger measure of responsibility than earlier years, where the police basically were running away as fast as they could from taking any type of responsibility for curbing the violence or making Jews feel welcome on the Temple Mount. The attitude of the police is quite different, and the real job ahead is to get to the head of the government to change his attitude. And also, in the meantime, by reaching more and more people, it's inevitable that we're a democracy, so it filters up to the top.
Oh, it's a democracy?
It's a democracy.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
That's why we're striding in the right direction, because the people are speaking and the top listens.
Everybody, don't forget to study this week's Torah portion of Tetzaveh in depth.
And thank you for being with us on Temple Talk.